beginning. I was like, what am I going to do? Like, am I going on disability? Is this going to be it? Like, I'm never doing a surgery again? Like, it was scary at that point because you don't know what's going to happen and you're scared and you have a little PTSD, really. Like, there's just, because it happened while I was actually taping the show, so.
There are some stories that the internet cannot quite contain. Stories that spill past thumbnails and comment sections and trending hashtags and demand something more from us, demand that we actually sit down, go quiet, and pay attention. The story of Dr. Sandra Lee, known to millions around the world as Dr. Pimple Popper, is one of those stories. Because on the surface, it looks like a medical update. A health scare. A celebrity going through something difficult and then coming out the other side. But if you look closer, if you actually follow the thread from beginning to end, what you find is something far more profound than a headline. What you find is the story of a woman who spent her entire life building something extraordinary, only to have a single November morning remind her that the body keeps its own score, and it always, eventually, collects. Sandra Lee turned 55 in December of 2025. And just weeks before that birthday, her brain had a stroke. Let that land for a moment. Not because strokes are rare, they are not. Not because 55 is shockingly young, medically, it is increasingly common. But because of who Sandra Lee is. Because of what she had built. Because of everything that was at stake in that single moment, and because of how close the entire story came to ending in a way none of us would have wanted. To understand the weight of what happened, you have to understand where she came from. Not the YouTube channel. Not the television show. Not the 6 billion views or the Target shelves lined with her skincare products. You have to go back further. You have to go back to a family that arrived in this country with almost nothing, carrying the particular kind of determination that only immigrants who have truly sacrificed something can carry. Her father, Dr. Soon Seng Lee, grew up in Singapore as one of 10 children. Her mother, Irene, grew up in Malaysia with the same kind of humble beginning, a large family, scarce resources, and an understanding from childhood that survival required effort that most people would find unimaginable. These two people found each other, built a life through sheer will and academic discipline, emigrated to the United States in 1969, and started over in a country that was not theirs yet. 1 year later, in December of 1970, Sandra was born in Flushing, Queens, the first chapter of an American story that neither of her parents could have fully predicted when they stepped off the plane. Her father had discovered his calling in the most unlikely of ways. While working as a medical officer in rural Malaysia, he was repeatedly stumped by patients presenting with skin conditions he did not know how to treat. His solution was to slip behind a privacy curtain and consult a small dermatology textbook left behind by a visiting American medical team. That borrowed book, read in secret, in a rural clinic, changed everything. It was the spark that sent him down the path of dermatology, the same path his daughter would eventually walk, the same practice he would eventually build in Upland, California, the same walls Sandra would grow up inside, surrounded by medical photographs and textbooks and the quiet hum of a father who had turned curiosity into a career. Sandra was not supposed to be a dermatologist. She was supposed to choose her own path. But when your childhood home is a dermatology practice, when skin disease photographs are on your coffee table, when dinner table conversation includes medical terminology most children have never heard, the path has a way of choosing you. She was fascinated by what would horrify most kids. She was drawn to exactly the kind of visual complexity that would eventually make her famous. She studied biology at UCLA, completed medical school at Hahnemann University in Philadelphia, and met her future husband, Jeffrey Rebish, on the very first day of orientation. He had come thinking about orthopedics. She redirected him into dermatology without even trying. They married in May of 2000, built a family and a medical partnership together in Southern California, and seemed, from the outside, to have constructed exactly the life they intended. But her path had a painful detour first. After her 4th year of medical school, Sandra did not match into a dermatology residency. The field her father loved. The specialty she had essentially been raised inside. The door closed. And she had to reckon with a rejection that felt, as she described it years later, like a dream she could not wake up from. She briefly considered emergency medicine. She regrouped. She eventually matched elsewhere, completed a fellowship in laser surgery in San Diego under a renowned physician, and made her way back to California, back to her father's practice, back to the work she had always been drawn to, but now with a harder-won credential and a deeper understanding of what it costs to want something that doesn't come easily. She took over her father's practice. She was excellent at it. Her patients loved her. Her hands were precise. Her manner was calm. Her ability to explain complex procedures in language that made patients feel safe rather than scared was remarkable. And yet, for years, the practice was the practice. Respected. Local. Successful in the quiet way that good medical careers are successful. Then came the moment that changed everything. In October of 2010, Sandra created a YouTube channel. For the first 4 years, it was essentially a digital brochure, professional, informative, and largely unwatched. Then, in 2014, she posted a blackhead extraction on Instagram. It went viral in hours. She had been watching a hairstylist accumulate millions of views showing hair treatments, and she had asked herself a simple but transformative question: could dermatology work the same way? The answer, it turned out, was yes, in a scale she had not anticipated. By 2015, she was uploading extraction videos regularly under the name Dr. Pimple Popper. Her most watched single video, the removal of a large blackhead from an elderly woman, has been viewed over 75 million times. Her fans, who call themselves Popaholics, became one of the more unusual and genuinely devoted communities on the internet. These were not just people who liked watching satisfying videos. Many of them had skin conditions of their own. Many of them had felt shame about those conditions for years. Sandra Lee gave them a space where what was usually hidden was treated with care, with curiosity, and without judgment. TLC called in 2018. The television show premiered on July 11th of that year, became the top-rated cable program in its time slot among women 25 to 54, and ran for 9 seasons across 111 episodes. She won the Critics' Choice Real TV Award for Female Star of the Year 3 consecutive years in a row. She launched SLMD skincare into over 1,600 target locations across the country. She wrote a book. She appeared on late-night television. At the peak of her YouTube presence, her channel was generating close to $100,000 per month. Her father had built a practice. She had built an empire, and she had built it on top of his. When TLC ended the show in 2023, Sandra did not slow down. She moved to Lifetime with a new format called Dr. Pimple Popper, Breaking Out, which added a mentorship angle and, for the first time, showed her personal life on camera alongside the medical work. Season 1 aired in April of 2025. Season 2 was greenlit in August of 2025 with 20 new episodes already planned. Jeffrey had become an executive producer. The machine was not just running, it was accelerating. And that, quietly, was the problem. Inside that machine was a woman running on something that is not sustainable. A full surgical practice with real patients requiring real care. A YouTube channel demanding constant fresh content in a competitive landscape that punishes absence. The promotional obligations of a Lifetime television show. A skincare brand. Public appearances. A family. And underneath all of it, a set of health numbers she knew about and had not sufficiently addressed. High blood pressure, high cholesterol, and the chronic stress that comes from never fully stopping. Sandra Lee is a physician. She knew what those numbers meant. She knew what chronic stress does to the cardiovascular system over time. She knew the warning signs of stroke, face drooping, arm weakness, sudden speech difficulty, balance problems, confusion, the way most people know their own phone number. She had almost certainly counseled patients about these exact risk factors. She understood the physiology. And still, the machine kept running, because the machine always feels more urgent than the maintenance. The show needs filming. The patients are waiting. The content calendar does not pause. This is not a character flaw. This is the trap that high-performing people fall into at a rate that should terrify all of us. It was a regular workday at the Upland practice in November of 2025. Cameras were rolling. Patients had traveled from across the country hoping Sandra could help them with something they had lived with for years. She was doing exactly what she had done thousands of times. Working, narrating, performing the steady, precise version of herself that her audience trusted completely. And then her body sent a signal she almost missed. A wave of heat. Not the heat of a long day, but something different, sudden and total, washing over her from the inside. Her thinking felt cloudy. Her body felt wrong. She pushed through. She is a professional. She finished the workday. She drove herself to her parents' house nearby and told herself it was probably a hot flash. That evening, she could not settle. She felt restless in a way she could not explain. One of her legs was sending shooting pains she could not account for. When she tried to go downstairs to find something to eat, she noticed her balance was off. Walking felt wrong. Her legs were not responding the way they always had. She did not sleep that night. The next morning, she held out her left hand and watched it slowly close on its own, without her directing it to. She tried to speak and the words came out garbled, imprecise, not fully under her control. She had slurred speech. She had weakness on one side of her body. She had balance problems and confusion and a sudden onset that fit the clinical picture so precisely that even through the fog of what was happening, she asked herself the question no one ever wants to ask: am I having a stroke? And even then, even as a physician, even knowing what she knew, even recognizing the symptoms she had memorized, part of her wanted to explain it away. This is what researchers have documented consistently. Women experiencing strokes are significantly more likely to attribute their symptoms to something else, and significantly less likely to seek emergency care quickly, because stroke symptoms in women so often mimic other conditions. Sudden sweating, fatigue, restlessness, shooting pains in the limbs. In a woman in her mid-50s, these symptoms are almost reflexively attributed to menopause. The medical establishment has spent decades inadvertently training women, and the people around them, to see these signs as hormonal rather than neurological. Sandra Lee had the same reflex. She thought hot flash. Her brain was already fighting for oxygen, and her first instinct was to minimize. Her father saved her life. Dr. Soon Seng Lee, the man who learned dermatology from a borrowed book behind a privacy curtain in rural Malaysia, who emigrated to America with almost nothing, who built the practice his daughter now runs, looked at his daughter that morning and recognized immediately what she could not fully acknowledge about herself. He told her to go to the emergency room. Not later. Now. She went. The MRI at the hospital removed any remaining ambiguity. Sandra Lee had suffered a full ischemic stroke, the kind caused when a blood clot cuts off blood supply to part of the brain, starving the affected area of oxygen. Every minute an ischemic stroke goes untreated, the brain loses approximately 2 million cells. The damage is not temporary. Dead brain cells do not regenerate. The window for the most effective intervention is narrow, hours, not days. Her father's insistence, delivered at exactly the right moment, almost certainly changed the outcome of her story. She said it herself, plainly and without drama: a part of my brain died. For most people, that sentence is simply devastating to hear. For Sandra Lee, it carried a specific professional weight that most headlines fail to capture. Her entire career is built in her hands. The precise grip required to perform dermatological procedures, the steady control needed to remove a decades-old cyst without leaving a scar, the fine motor coordination that separates a good outcome from a bad one, all of that lives in her hands. Her left hand, after the stroke, had weakened grip. For a surgeon, that is not an inconvenience. That is a direct threat to the ability to practice medicine. And her voice, the calm, articulate, reassuring narration that her millions of viewers had come to trust, was altered in ways she says most people cannot detect but that she notices constantly, every time she speaks.